Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020.
Hump day.
Yeah, so they say. Rocking out with a little Beethoven this morning.
Always
Experimenting.
good. Always good.
Trying some new musical effects here.
It's very good for the mind, the body, and the soul. That type of music. It really is.
So peaceful. So cranking it down.
Good start on this day in history, I guess, and then we'll roll into the topic of the day. But we'll start 1875. A young fella named Billy the Kid was arrested for the first time, and that was in 1875. First of many. 1952, Rocky Marciano defeated Jersey Joe Walcott, and in effect then retired undefeated. And at the time, he was the only professional fighter that retired undefeated. Teddy Roosevelt in 1924 was nominated as the governor of New York. Up until that point, he was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. 1925, President Hoover, it's basically the birth of commercial airlines. He was pushing municipalities to build airports to, support commercial airlines across the country. 1934, a football team called the Detroit Lions played their first NFL game. And that was all on this day in history.
What a day.
What a day indeed. So, I saw something interesting in Rolling Stone. Back in 2003, they had a list, and it's really a comprehensive list because it's 500, the 500 top albums of all time. All right, and in 2003, that was seen as, whether you like Rolling Stone magazine or not, they polled 200 or 300 different musicians, producers, everybody in the music business, journalists, and they came up with a list of the 500 greatest albums of all time, and this was in 2003. So when I woke up this morning, I saw that Rolling Stone now updated the list 17 years later and now has another updated 500 greatest albums of all time list. And I was expecting to see most of the same albums, and I was completely shocked that not only were there different albums that were in there, but seminal albums that you would think would be in the list were really pushed back, if not removed from the list at all, altogether. So I figured maybe we'll go over 2003 and then compare them to 2020 and see what the differences are, and discuss. It'll lead us into a discussion of some changes in music and whatnot. So I didn't want to sit and go through 500 or 1,000 albums, so we just did the top 10 from both of those years. Now, let's start with 2003. Top 10 albums in 2003 were, at number 10, the Beatles' White Album, which came out in 1968. Okay. Number 9, Bob Dylan, Blonde on Blonde, which was 1966. Number 8 was The Clash, London Calling.
Wow.
Came out in 1980. Number 7 was the Rolling Stones, Exile on Main Street, which came out in 72. Number 6, Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, which came out in 1971. Number 5 was the Beatles' Rubber Soul, came out in 1965. Number 4, Bob Dylan, Highway 61 Revisited, which came out in 65.
One of my personal favorites right there.
Your grandfather's also, he used to play that a lot. I remember that was one of his.
I believe it's also called Bring It All Back Home. It's another one of his. Just to jump in there, I love those two. Big this time of year for me for some reason.
What is that? Another one of his albums or something?
Yeah. It's like really like I think it's the one.
Whatever
before.
was it? Was it electric?
It was
acoustic?
the one before Highway 61.
Okay, gotcha.
And I think it's like him on the cover with a girl.
Was he acoustic at that point, or was
he was
the album
like really
more?
Still acoustic, but you could tell that he was like gearing up. It was like more folk rock.
Gotcha. Yeah, because 61 was Revisited was 1965.
Yep.
Okay, number 3 was the Beatles' Revolver, which was 1966, and in my I'll get back to that, but I was going to say, I would probably say that's probably, in my opinion, my
Revolver?
Yeah, the best of them all, but that's always changing. Number 2, Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, which came out in 1966. And number 1, which at the time was really not surprising, and it was generally considered in the early, around the turn of the century or the millennium to be the best album of all time in music circles, and that was Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's, which came out in the summer of love, 1967. So that was 2003, the top 10. I'll rip through them quick. 10, we got the White Album by the Beatles. 9, Bob Dylan, Blonde on Blonde. 8, The Clash, London Calling. 7, Exile on Main Street by the Stones. 6, Marvin Gaye, What's Going On. 5, Beatles, Rubber Soul. 4, Bob Dylan, Highway 61 Revisited. 3, Beatles, Revolver. 2, Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. 1, Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's. Now, the change, a lot of different albums in this list from 2003 to 2020. And I guess, with what has changed recently, the climate politically and what's been going on with the protesting and coronavirus, there's just been a lot going on this year. We also have a lot of new artists, like somebody like a Billie Eilish who wasn't around back when, so we're seeing albums, a lot of rap albums, and I'm just talking in the 500 list, not the top 10, but within the 500 list, you saw like a spike in rap albums that you didn't see in 2003. A lot of new artists that weren't around at the time or weren't really known, so there was a lot of changes, but the top 10 in 2020, and that's really updated because it's as of yesterday. So number 10 in 2020, Lauryn Hill, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, which came out in 1998. Number 9, Bob Dylan, Blood on the Tracks.
Good one.
So now that's the only Dylan album in the top 10. And they took out Blonde on Blonde and Highway 61 Revisited, and they replaced it with Blood on the Tracks, which is my personal favorite Dylan album, Blood on the Tracks. So,
is that from like
75?
Yeah.
It's got Tangled Up in Blue on it. Yeah, I love that album.
That was a great era when he started doing the white face.
Phenomenal.
He was like on something else.
Yeah, that was. He had gone through a bad divorce. He had a lot of things going on personally.
Motorcycle accident, I think.
Yeah, he had a lot of things going on, but that was a real, different phase for him. But I like that album. Number 8, Prince and the Revolution, Purple Rain, which he has died since the last list was made, so sometimes sentimentality figures into it. Also, he did the Super Bowl since then, and he had a huge performance,
right.
So his career did have a resurgence. Okay, number 7, Fleetwood Mac, Rumors, which was 1977, and that, I think, hard to argue with that one. That was just like a seminal album, had tons of hits. A lot of women like it because there's a lot of Stevie Nicks fans. I mean, men like it also, but it's just Stevie Nicks has a tremendous amount of female fans, and I could see that being in there. Number 6.
Very talented.
Very. Number 6, Nirvana, Nevermind, which...
breakthrough album.
It was. I can't argue with that one. The only one so far that I have a little issue with would be Lauryn Hill, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, as far as making that in the top 10. I could see it being in the top maybe 50, but top 10 is like rarefied air. I wouldn't say that that's better than certain albums that aren't on. Okay, number 5, Abbey Road. Can't argue. 1969. Number 4, Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life, which was 1976. I wouldn't argue with that one. Stevie Wonder to me is, especially his output in the 70s,
one of the best.
Phenomenal. And that happens to be my personal favorite Stevie Wonder album. So I'll back that one. This one surprised me, Joni Mitchell, Blue, 1971, and that's at number 3. So that one took a huge jump. I don't know where it was prior to that, but it wasn't even in the top 10, and it's now at number 3. Number 2, Beach Boys, Pet Sounds, 1966, which is interesting because in 2003 that was at number 2 also.
The Beach Boys are like an unshakable group in like American history. I feel like it's just amazing. Like and you taught me a lot about them. I never knew.
What's interesting about the Beach Boys though is that Pet Sounds is seen like I'll give you an example. Paul McCartney, when he's asked what his favorite song of all time is, it's "God Only Knows" by the Beach Boys,
Really?
and that's on that album. And although they had a tremendous amount of hits in the '60s and some in the '70s and even Kokomo in the '80s, I mean, they were very popular for a long period of time. Still reasonably popular today, but when you look at great albums, really Pet Sounds was their only album that's like spoken about as being this masterpiece.
Right.
So
It was.
it was a masterpiece without a doubt, and you can't argue with its placement. Number one, jumping up from number 6 in 2003, was Marvin Gaye, "What's Going On." That was 1971, and it's now, as of 2020, voted on the number one album of all time. And it dealt with a lot of racial tension. What's interesting is the topics that it dealt with in 1971, racial tension, economic issues, like
Same thing as today.
same thing today, you know. So I guess the Clash no longer in the top 10.
I don't know if they. I like them, but
Yeah, I mean, that's what let's discuss. I mean,
Yeah.
what's your feeling on the
where's the Ramones? Is my feeling.
Okay. Well, there's no Ramones in 2003 or 2020.
They're like the Rodney Dangerfields. They never got their respect. You know?
Everybody likes them too, like
Right.
all musicians. So I'm very surprised because that is who was interviewed. I'm very surprised that they weren't in there. Some albums that I don't. Where's a Led Zeppelin album in the top 10?
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of groups that
It's so subjective.
it is, but they did take a large. I mean, they took 200 to 300 people in the music industry, so it wasn't like they just asked 10 people and said,
Yeah.
"Okay, what's you?" They asked a wide variety. You know, I think that there's no Rolling Stones albums anymore in the top 10.
Strange.
Those are two bands that, you know, and there's now only one Beatle album, and in my opinion, I
Abbey
am
Road.
I am a Beatles fan, so it is very, but I would think that in the top 10 albums of all time, not to have either Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's, or the White Album in there
Yeah,
anywhere.
I mean the White Album.
You know,
for
like,
sure.
I'm surprised. Joni Mitchell, Blue, I mean, at number 3 of all time, I wouldn't put her above Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life, but again, like you said, it is subjective. Nirvana, Nevermind, I think, is definitely deserving of a place. It really did. That was, you know, that album really was like the death knell for the
For
80s.
the 80s era.
Yeah, because, you know, when the early 90s came around, there was like, I remember going to a party and you'd see like remnants of the 80s, like when Guns N' Roses released their double album, Use Your Illusion. They had November Rain on it. It had some other, Don't Cry, a couple of other big hits. But people were still playing that style of music, you
Right.
know. Then all of a sudden, I remember going to a party and somebody said, put on Pearl Jam, put on Nirvana. And it was like,
It went from one sound to
completely,
another.
and it just, then anything that you put on from the 80s was seen as like outdated, you know, but they would still put on stuff from the 60s. You'd still hear Floyd, you'd still hear,
Yeah.
you know, the Doors, but anything from the 80s with that style.
I wonder
it was
why
like,
the cheek was turned so quickly to that.
well, you know, I think that when musicians are signed, usually what happens is it's like anything else, it's a business. So it happened in in the early 80s in California where they signed Motley Crue, and all of a sudden every band from that point on that looked like Motley Crue or sounded like Motley Crue got signed. And that's why you had that whole wave of hair metal and everything else, because it was like all the record companies started milling around and just, you know, and a band like Guns N' Roses, although they didn't get big till 87, 88, they were around in the mid 80s, 85, 86, you know, they would just, and they were waiting.
touring.
They were waiting. Motley Crue took them out on tour and stuff. They were waiting to be signed, but bands like Rat, you know, all those hair metal bands, you know.
They went away.
So,
They're back again, though.
yeah, well,
Back
it's
and they
nostalgia.
look scarier than
yeah,
ever.
scarier than ever. It's, you know, when they try to hang on to that 80s look, you know, that's the
Bret
problem.
Michaels looks good.
he does. I mean,
for his diabetes and all
yeah,
the stuff he has.
yeah, he does. I think it's obviously a wig or something that he wears, but
Well,
it is what it is. You know, he's got
still looks good.
Yeah, he's got to maintain the image.
Who else looks good from that era? Do you know?
I think all the guys except two of the guys in Motley Crue look decent. You know,
Nikki Sixx looks good.
You know, Tommy Lee looks
like Tommy Lee.
Yeah.
He's like almost.
Vince Neil looks aged tremendously, and Mick Mars is aged. He's old. He was a lot older than the other guys. He was old when they came out. You know, that's what's.
He was like 10 years older.
Yeah. So it's funny when you look at Vince Neil before that. He looks like he could have been in the Allman Brothers. He was in some bands when he was like, in his 20s. He was married with kids. Like he was like hustling on the music scene, and he kind of lucked out. And Nikki Sixx took an ad out, and it said, looking for a loud, rude, aggressive guitarist. And Mick Mars, but to me, him and Tommy were the best musicians in that band. They were.
Mick Mars and Tommy Lee.
Yeah. Mick Mars is a fantastic guitar player.
He's got his own style for sure.
Absolutely, and he's known. people that are
respect him.
Yeah, he's very well respected in the music business. But what's funny is like, when you looked at that band, even in the Girls video, the young guys, Nikki and Tommy are in a strip bar and they're giving money to the girls, they're drinking, and then they show Mick Mars and he's sitting there smoking a cigarette in the back, playing his guitar.
Out.
Yeah, he never.
He was the old man.
Yeah, he never partook in the festivities with the other guys. In the beginning of the video, they're riding their motorcycles. It's only three of them. It's Vince, Tommy, and Nikki. Mick Mars was just, he didn't like. They were kids,
somewhere.
and Tommy Lee was a teenager when he was signed.
Yeah.
So they were really different in age, but.
Machine Gun Kelly is like his adopted son now.
Yeah, I see
and
that.
His own son punched him in his eye.
Oh, I saw that. That was crazy. What happened with that?
I don't know. I imagine just an endless amount of dysfunction and spoiled, rotten California kid.
And he filmed it.
Did he? I didn't know that.
He put it online.
That he
put a picture of his dad unconscious online.
Oh, he knocked him out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he sucker punched him and knocked him out. Mm-hmm.
That's pretty crazy. I didn't know that. I just knew that he got a
scummy
black eye.
thing to do.
Yeah, that is really scummy.
But
now Machine Gun Kelly came in, and it's all good.
Yeah, I guess he adopted him as his son.
They're everywhere together.
He did a good job playing him in the movie.
He did. You wouldn't expect it from a guy like him to be able to act.
He did a well. I think they,
That was a good one.
It was a good movie. Stevie Wonder. I want to just touch on some of the bands that are in there now. Stevie Wonder, I remember from being a kid in the 70s and hearing songs like, especially off of that album, like Sir Duke or Isn't She Lovely and stuff. Those are just songs that instantly get stuck in your mind. And then he came out with some stuff in the 80s, which was kind of, he really crossed over into the pop world with I Just Called to Say I Love You, which my father detests. So that's one artist that he and I argue about is Stevie Wonder. To me, I think the guy is like one of my favorites. He so detested his stuff in the 80s that it's like he ruined.
Really?
Yeah, he hated that stuff. Hated it. And in fact, I always bring it up to him. Like, did you like Stevie Wonder, or did you ever like any? He's like, I hate that song. So, but he also wrote. I don't know if you ever heard "Tears of the Clown" by Smokey Robinson.
No.
You never heard "Tears of a Clown" by Smokey Robinson? Wow, that is one of the most
I might have.
famous Motown songs of all time, and it's the musical part of that song is just like almost sounds like a circus. But Stevie Wonder wrote that part for that song. The guy was multi-talented. So
I always liked Stevie Wonder.
Phenomenal.
Some stuff I could take or leave.
Yeah.
But his good stuff, when he's good, he's great, So
phenomenal. And they also use a ton of his music gets sampled, like
constantly.
Gangsta's Paradise was Pastime Paradise from that album. So they took that. Wild Wild West, which Will Smith did, was a Stevie Wonder song entirely, and it was off of this album as well. And they took that sample. On and on. A lot of his songs were sampled, but he, guy that could play a multitude of instruments.
And he was blind.
Huh? And he was, that was. But in the 60s, he came out as little Stevie Wonder. And he was like a teenager, even younger than a teenager. And he had some hits in the 60s, and he'd be up there with like his harmonica just singing, and he was like a kid.
Yeah.
You know, and then in 72, he came out with Superstition, and that was his real jump to adulthood. But he had a bad car accident also, and you know, during his career, and it led to, I believe, Intervisions or I don't know, one of his bigger albums though after his accident. So he was almost killed in it.
Wow.
Yeah. So Bob Dylan obviously is a historical figure.
Yeah, you're not the biggest Dylan guy, right?
I with Dylan, I respect what he did. You don't get that good for that, you know, that popular for that long without being good. I like the album that's actually on the top 10. Blood on the Tracks is my favorite Dylan album, so I do like it. I like some of his stuff.
I get a kick out of when he's in the Traveling Wilburys, and it looks
Yeah.
like he's putting in zero effort.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that was
his style in a sense.
Yeah,
like,
it was. You know,
He wasn't flashy. He
No.
wasn't like a flashy singer, guitar player, but he was very good at it. Like, he could play bass really good. Like a lot of
He's
different.
He's talented,
Very
no
talented.
question. He's probably
And
among
his-
the best lyricists of all time.
When I was in like 10th grade in high school, they had his books that he wrote. I found them
Mhm.
by chance in the school library, and I remember taking them home and reading them, and it was all about his younger influences and then his early trips to New York from Minnesota and stuff. It's pretty cool. He lived a
known.
very interesting life.
Well known as one of the best lyricists of all time. In fact, the reason they say for the Beatles' Rubber Soul album was the meeting with Dylan. It were heavily influenced to switch over to an acoustic style
Yep.
and produce one of their best albums and one of my favorite.
For
Beatle
anybody who'd like to see how that went down,
Yeah.
you could check on YouTube Bob Dylan Meets the Beatles. It's a quick animation, and it will give you a pretty accurate rundown of the Rubber Soul early productions.
Cigarettes.
Yeah.
Surprised not to see Sgt. Pepper's or Revolver not in there anymore. Rumors by Fleetwood Mac was definitely one that I could see. You know, the album, it's interesting because they call it Rumors, and you had all these different love triangles in the band, and you had different people dating different people within the band, and I believe Christine McVie and John McVie were married, and at one point, Mick Fleetwood and Lindsey Buckingham had affairs with Stevie Nicks. So that was a interesting time. A lot of drugs, a lot of cocaine for that, you know, in that era, and it destroyed Stevie Nicks' nose. She had some major issues with her septum and stuff. Yeah. So
I can't even imagine.
apparently there's a hole she made burned right through from the cocaine. So
Oh, God.
yeah. So there was a lot of
That
drugs.
really freaks me out.
Yeah. Prince. Interesting, nothing from Michael Jackson in the top 10. Like Thriller, I could see
True.
it being, you know, it's that album. Look, love Michael Jackson or hate Michael Jackson. For my era, my age group, the Thriller album was such a landmark. I mean, it dominated. First of all, it was released in 82, at the end of 82, but it was spurned a hit in 82. It dominated the airwaves in 83, and the video for Thriller didn't even come out till 84, which was a huge cultural moment too.
I can't. I've been to so many weddings or a part of them where Thriller's played, and
Yeah.
literally it could be hundreds of people.
Yeah.
They're all on the floor doing Thriller.
That video.
There's not many dances like that.
No. That video, when it came out, I remember running to my friend's house because we heard it was going to be on, and sitting with, you know, and this is a black artist, and it was 3 white kids sitting there watching TV. Like, it was such a crossover. I mean,
Yeah.
kids would do, like, the entire class when I was in second grade, were trying to do the moonwalk because we saw Michael Jackson on this Motown show on TV.
It's hard.
And back then, you know, you didn't have cable was just starting, you know, so everybody was watching network TV, and it was kids were all doing the moonwalk, and it was like he was just, you know, you'd see guys, some guys have the Michael Jackson jacket on,
glove.
yeah, the glove. It was he was
like
a
in Wedding
phenomenon.
Singer.
Yeah, but he was. It's tough to explain to somebody. Just like I wasn't around, I was too old. I'm too young to know what it was like during Beatlemania. it's tough to explain to somebody just how big Michael Jackson was when Thriller came out. It was like he dominated like
Everything.
culture.
Yeah.
You know, it was like he was everywhere. MTV was all Michael Jackson. Magazine covers, Michael Jackson. We Are the World came out. He was right. You know, he was only on for a minute, but everybody had a report that he was. You know, he didn't want his photograph taken. It was just he dominated, and you know, I don't know. And the album is the number one selling album of all time. So it's odd that it's not even in the top 10.
That is odd.
You know,
I would agree. I'm not his biggest fan, but I think
no, I'm not
I think
either.
He's pretty good.
In my lifetime, he was the biggest celebrity that I've ever seen. And just from the time I was born till, you know, he reached a point that was just rarefied air. Like
The Doors never really reached any point of, like, they're super popular,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm kind of surprised that they wouldn't have an album on there either, because they were like a quintessential.
they were an early California band. Well, my father told me about the Doors because, again, that was in the 60s. I was born in 74. I saw the movie in 1990, I believe it was, or 91 when it came out. And they had like a resurgence then where a lot of kids, like a lot of people got like Doors greatest hits albums, and they were popular. But my father said they were popular in the 60s, but it wasn't like
Yeah.
this zeitgeist for the Doors. You know, it wasn't like everybody was into them, but they had an interesting sound. So
They did, and I figured by today they would be regarded as like
yeah,
they have a lot of, even to this day, like I think Jim Morrison's like early style and fashion
yeah.
is still like kind of
A
modeled
lot of people
after-
copy it.
Yeah,
A band called The Cult, Ian Astbury. Not only does he,
I mean even that's
Yeah.
like I would consider that old.
it is,
And
yeah,
that was
that's
then.
an '80s
People
band.
are still
yeah,
doing
yes,
that. You know?
absolutely, absolutely. He's
That's what's crazy to me is he
Mm-hmm.
is such an icon.
yeah,
I mean, in French, in Parisian culture, like
Mm-hmm. yeah.
if
That's
you
where
go
he's
to
buried.
yeah, like he's a major. You know, France didn't want his body.
Why?
It was a
You
big
know
legal.
why?
They didn't believe at the time the French government didn't like his.
his antics and stuff. Nor did
right.
the American government.
So nobody really wanted him.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
pretty crazy.
He, you know, there's like certain frontman like styles. You have like a Robert Plant, like the Golden God type of style of frontman. Yeah, the mopey, sad, like introspective. Yeah, misunderstood. Then there's like the Mick Jagger, you know, just
Right.
like the total prancing, you know.
There's the Michael Jackson.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying frontman for bands, though. Like, I'm trying, like, Jim Morrison is the other type, though. Like, I would
The
think like an
acid
Eddie
tripping.
Vedder,
Yeah.
those types of guys. I think the sound even, it really, you're right. He's very duplicated, Jim Morrison. He's very
There's like a
duplicated.
guy that I like. His group is called Father John Misty.
Uh-huh.
And to me, it's stylistically the music's a little different,
Right.
But the lyrical content's very strange, and the guy's all about like freedom now, legalize LSD,
Right.
Very much like you could see like he has like a Jim Morrison shtick with like the type of clothes he wears and how
Right.
he presents himself.
Yeah.
Like he's mystical, almost, you know.
Well, Jim Morrison's definitely a copied guy. I mean, there's no question about it.
Big drinker.
Yeah, well, he's big everything. That's why he dropped dead. Heavy smoker, heavy, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in the 27 Club, you know.
Yep.
So, but he was
Crazy how he looked when he died.
yeah, big change
At
from
that
when he
age.
first came out to, you know. But apparently, you know, again, you know, movies also they always make things, you know, make reality a little different from what it really was, and they tried to show he might have been on a road to redemption, and who
Yeah,
knows,
sure.
who knows. But when he came out, he was like, you know, all the covers of the magazines, and you know, he was a sex symbol when he came out. But
I think he
Yeah.
might quite possibly be like one of the most like handsome. You know, they do like
Frontmen?
yeah.
yeah, I guess that's part of
His
what
shtick.
sold him.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm surprised not to see anything, like I said, by the Rolling Stones on there. I could have seen Exile on Main Street, Sticky Fingers, Let It Bleed. I mean, any of the four Masterpiece Stones albums. I mean, they had a lot of great albums, but they had a run of 4 albums that were just phenomenal. So, Abbey Road I would definitely put on there by the Beatles. That was one of their best. Lauryn Hill, though, in the top 10.
I don't even know who that is, to be honest.
She was in the Fugees. Yeah, they were a band. The Fugees had Wyclef Jean, some guy Praz, and Lauryn Hill, and they were kind of like they did a song "Killing Me Softly." It was a hit.
Oh, I know that song.
Right. So they had a few hits, and that was a huge hit. They had a couple of hits, and then she came out with this album, and I'll tell you, I like all different types of music. I just can't. It just doesn't do anything for me, that album. And it's gotten so much praise, and I feel like certain albums are underrated. If I was ever going to say there's an overrated album, it would be Lauryn Hill. Yeah. It's like she got like 10 Grammy nominations. I mean, it was a huge album for her, but I just don't, there's not even one song on there that just grabs me. And, Joni Mitchell, I have to say, that's one artist that I just don't know enough about. I know some of her stuff. I've heard her. I know who she is. I just don't know enough about that album to comment on whether it should be or shouldn't be in there. Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? No question, is that a great, one of the great albums of all time. I think it got a boost at number 1 due to what's going on lately with racial tensions and, just the political issues that are going on. I think that really catapulted that to the number 1 spot, because I don't think I would put it over some of the other albums that it did. So, what are some other albums that you would think would be on there? I'm trying to think. What I've seen that.
Honestly, my taste of music is not even really.
Yeah, it's not a popular.
Close to any of that.
So you don't like the.
I like some of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I consider some classics maybe pre-classics there's some Howlin' Wolf. I just don't understand. Nobody ever gives any of that music any attention, really.
Except for the old
the real
school
dudes.
Guys. Yeah, Keith Richards is a big proponent of the
Howlin' Wolf, all these guys. These
Chuck Berry.
Berry, Fats Domino.
Robert
to me,
Johnson.
Dr. John's Right Place, Wrong Time album.
Yeah, I got you.
You know what I mean? I love that stuff.
Yeah. So, I think this is just.
So for me,
this is more, I think, just like a list of the popular. There are different styles of music. Rap made tremendous inroads during the 80s and especially in the 90s.
I have a couple rap albums actually that even a fairly modern one. It's called Monopoly from this guy Danny Brown. In my opinion, in 20 years, that's gonna be
Was it popular now?
It wasn't super
when did it come out?
popular. Probably 2013, 2014.
Okay.
Maybe a little earlier. But it's just so. Listen. You guys can all listen to it on your own. I can't really explain it, but it's just one of those. His lyrical content's great. He references a lot of rock stars and people from actually these days and ages. So it's cool. It's hard for some people to swallow that rap pill. Yeah. But I understand why some of them are in there. I
like, myself as far as rap. I like the early days of rap. I like the 80s specifically. I like some of the stuff in the 90s. Today's stuff to me is just, it's too commercialized and just, it's kind of lost me. But
this Danny Brown album was almost like an underground.
Yeah, see, that's the type of stuff I like. I don't like the crap like that kid with the rainbow hair and all that shit. No. That stuff that's
a different.
It turns me off.
That's pop.
Right, that's what I mean. I like the, which is why I like the 80s style rap, because it was very very raw. A lot of the MCs, you could tell the difference between
them. It was like
them.
the Elvis of rap. It was very innocent in a sense compared to
very sparse beats. It was a different style. It was they just
something. The Beastie Boys should have been on that.
That to me, that album licensed. Like I said, there's certain albums in my lifetime that had, even albums in the 70s I heard as a little kid. I'd hear songs on the radio, but it wasn't until the mid 80s that I knew albums as a whole, and I could say, okay, yeah, that's a great album. Beastie Boys' License to Ill was played at every single gathering of kids, at least where I grew up. Anytime you go to a girl's house with a bunch of guys, and then there was some more girls, and before you knew it, that album was out and was on the radio. Then if you were playing, I was playing basketball in my friend's backyard, and he had a little box. In those days, we had these boom boxes, and he put on License to Ill. It was just always played, So that's one of the albums from my lifetime that is probably,
I would agree,
among the most famous.
They were also just incredibly well versed at music.
Yeah,
in general.
well, that's the thing too, is they don't get credit for their punk side,
right?
And the fact that they did play instruments and they were able to. It was actually interesting how they did it, because some of their that's why I really like License to Ill, because it was like they took a lot of the Zeppelin riffs. They took Kerry King from Slayer played on that album. They took funk. It was like a real
blend of good stuff.
Yeah, and it was a real crossover album because you had a rock edge to it.
Yep.
And
I love that song, Gratitude.
Oh yeah,
that's like one of those
That was a little later, but yeah, that was a great
album. I know,
album.
but you
Phenomenal.
get a real clear picture of MCA's bass playing.
Yeah.
And that and Sabotage.
Yep.
Like those licks that he does are, if you
Yep.
are into music and you hear that, it when it starts,
Sure.
travels right up your spine.
Yeah. There's an
That's
album, Check Your Head, it's called, and that album is where they play, entirely on the album is just them playing their instruments and rapping over it, which is
it's not easy to do that.
No. So What You Want is on that album. A couple others, so that was a great album. Great album.
They are definitely they deserve
one of my favorites.
Yeah, me too.
I love them. I always did. But like I said, I remember hearing what I used to do. I had this little boom box that was maybe this big. I put it under the covers with me when I was laying down in the 80s, and Grandma would always say, shut it off, and I would just play it just loud enough so I could hear it to fall asleep, and I'd hear I remember hearing "Fight for Your Right to Party" for the first time.
Oh, every kid loves that.
I remember I heard it when it just came out, and it was like, what the heck is that? And I remember hearing "Jump" by Van Halen. I remember hearing a Prince song, "Let's Go Crazy," "Man Eater" by Hall & Oates. It was just such a wide variety of music back then that was on the radio, and Culture Club even. It was weird stuff, and it was all good stuff. But yeah, "Fight for Your Right" I remember hearing for the first time. That was very, a real change in the game. But really, Run DMC and the Beastie Boys were
the OGs.
They were the first. There was rap groups before them, and rap, MCs and DJs.
Dougie Fresh, right? Was he there?
He was early. Dougie Fresh was early. You had Grandmaster Flash and Melly Mel and all those guys.
Biz Markie?
He was around, but yeah, he was like
underground.
Yeah, but he became bigger in the late 80s, but he was around, those guys were all. But Grandmaster Flash and Melly Mel were the early 80s, White Lines
you ever
and
see
The
early
Message.
Pictures of Dr. Dre?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
In 84?
Yeah, I know. He was dressed
pretty
like
great. He dressed like Eddie Murphy in
Yeah,
Raw.
yep. So the 80s were weird. Well, look at Pantera. You ever see the early Pantera?
Yeah, they didn't look the same.
They have a glam look to them.
Isn't that the same with Alice in Chains also? They were
a lot of those bands were, they were kind of into the metal, they were into that metal, the hair metal and stuff, and then the 90s rolled around, and it was, there was an interesting scene or it was an interview with somebody, and he's like, I walked into the record company's office, and there was a picture of Warrant or something on the wall, and this guy was a rock guy, and he goes, at the time we were the king of the hill. We walked into the record company, and they had all buffet laid out for them and stuff when they came in, and then he said about 2 or 3 years later they walked in, and on the wall was a picture of Alice in Chains, and he's they had 2 apples on the table and stuff, and it was you're out, buddy, and that's kind of how it was. I mean, it was very few bands survived that cross. Now you see the 80s bands, there was a resurgence due to the remembrances, nostalgia and stuff of the time. But in the early to mid '90s, like a band like Poison,
They wanted it to just go away.
you wouldn't touch them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was weird. They were all over the radio, and literally the next year,
Done.
done. And if you played them, it was like, it was the
Sometimes
weirdest
that's
thing.
how I feel.
Weird.
I'm not gonna lie. Mm-hmm. I can't listen to like Skid Row.
Yeah,
I know
get
I
it.
complimented
Yeah.
Bret Michaels' appearance.
Uh-huh.
Or whatever. Can't listen to that.
I understand
It's just
it.
like, I
Yeah.
don't know what it is.
I get
Just-
it. I get it.
Just like even the score. Remember, I used to like listen to like the Scorpions.
Yeah, yeah.
I just that style of music just like irks me. I
Sure.
don't know what it is. It's so. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't appreciate the tone of it. I don't know.
Look, everybody's
but
got
I go
different
through
ears.
phases. Like
yeah.
I used to not be able to listen to Metallica.
Mhm.
Now I actually like really appreciate
Right.
them. I'm like, wow, they're pretty sick.
It's
Same for like Megadeth. So I
yeah.
go through phases.
That's it. Everybody,
musically.
that's the good thing about music, though, is that there are times I'll listen to just the '80s stuff, pop stuff from the '80s
Yeah.
that I remember. Then all of a sudden, I'm like, no way. Like I'll just go into Stone Temple Pilots
Yeah,
or
like 90s
something
stuff.
later. But that is what's great about music. But I just think that. Unfortunately, when you look at a list like this, not enough bands, like you said, like a Dr. John or a band like who's
I don't think Dr. John would deserve.
a
who am I?
top 10 place.
But for me, in
Sure.
my heart,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
that
the type
would be
of
one of the
music you
last
like.
songs I would hear. Probably.
Sure.
You know.
Like I said, there's certain albums that were game changers, and I think Nirvana, Nevermind, certain whether it was the best grunge album or even the best
For
Nirvana
some
album
reason, though,
is
there's
arguable.
something like with people in like your generation. Not saying you,
Yeah, I get it.
but it's as if like the music stopped being made after like.
Yeah.
99.
Oh, I'm there, man. I feel.
I don't know
I know.
why that your generation feels that way, because I could literally produce
Sure.
hundreds of acts that are, if not better.
And I'll
than
tell you
certain-
why. I'll tell
it's
you
so
why.
strange to me.
I'll tell you why. Because number one is, unfortunately, these acts that you're talking about, you don't hear them on the radio.
No, but that's why you got to get on the internet.
No, I know. But I'm saying, I'm
It's
just
difficult.
telling you the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
differences.
No, I
Yeah, I'm
hear
playing devil's advocate. That is the thing, though. It was so accessible. As a kid, you turn on the radio, and it was like you're hearing. It could be anything really any station you go to could be a good song. Whereas now, it's very formulated. It's just either the
Right.
same type of rap with that, like the mumble rap or whatever they call it.
WBAB, because
Yeah.
they'll post on like social media like, who's better, like Joan Jett or
Yeah.
like name another one that was like her in the
Lita
time.
Ford.
Right. And I'm like, this is laughable.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are really having competitions. I have to leave a nasty comment because
Yeah.
it's annoying. Like, that's the problem with why rock and roll's dying. Because who the hell wants to listen to the same 120 songs that they play in a week on a loop, on a loop, on a loop?
BAB is a good example of that because
That's why they're like falling apart.
when I worked in a warehouse in 1988, and that was my first exposure to real like rock stuff. Like up until that point, I was listening to like pop that was on the radio and stuff.
Sure.
But the problem was, these guys, when they put on their tapes and stuff, it was cool. We'd hear like Ozzy or Rush or a good, cool
Like
band.
like the disc jockeys mixtapes they would make or
Well,
something.
these guys that worked for me would make their own cassettes, and they would. Then it was good, and that's how I got. Like I went into the store and got a Rush tape, or I got Zeppelin. Before that, I didn't know any of those bands. But when the boss would leave BAB on in those days, it would be literally you'd only hear Led Zeppelin, "Stairway to Heaven,"
Right.
Black Dog, or Rock and Roll.
Right.
You'd hear Styx, like "Come Sail Away."
Right.
You'd hear, like
Still
just
the same thing.
and the other day I turned on BAB and I felt like it was 1988,
Yeah.
and it was the only thing that they did was they added a few grunge songs.
And they're like the ones you would
Plush
expect.
by Stone Temple
Right.
Pilots,
No.
Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana.
And
but
also
that's the problem.
Jeremy.
Yeah, that's
From Pearl Jam.
that's what. Other
It's
than
ridiculous.
that,
That's
it
all
was the
they
same.
play.
But that is the problem is those they go by. It's all like numbers. They all base it off of like there's program directors that tell the DJs what to play. You can only play. You could put
I
on
would
whatever
fire
order
them.
you want, but you have to play these songs within. And Howard Stern has talked about it when he used to play music when he was young. That was the way it was. The program directors controlled what was played. You, as a DJ, you picked the order that it was played in, but you had to play a certain number of songs. Like he said when he was young, Peter Frampton, when that album Frampton Comes Alive came out, you had to play these 2 songs off of that album at least like 4
Certain amount of
times
times a
during
day.
your,
Yeah.
and that's the problem. So
I'd rather pay $10 a month for the rest of my life for Spotify.
Yeah, I
than
agree.
Listen to a radio.
I
ever
agree.
Again,
I agree.
because I have access to literally
Yeah.
every song.
I
you
don't
can
listen to the radio at all.
imagine.
I don't think I've listened to the radio.
And the problem
In
with
5
YouTube
years.
is that the audio quality is diminished because it's some kind of pirated.
Correct.
But when you listen to Spotify, you're getting the top
Oh,
quality
I didn't know that.
audio.
Okay, so
And
I
it's
didn't
a
know
paid
that.
service,
Wow.
so all the songs are licensed
Ah.
and everything. It's worth every
Interesting.
penny.
Without a doubt. I stopped listening to, like,
Podcast, you got podcasts.
yeah, I didn't know that was different. Like, that's interesting. Thank you. Because
Yeah.
I stopped listening to radio.
It's 99
Done.
cents for the first 3 months, and then it goes up to $10 a month.
Well worth it.
But
then.
for me, the amount of music and
worth it.
content that
Well
I
worth
need,
it.
I would pay $30 a month.
I
honestly.
stopped even purchasing satellite radio because
Yeah, that's a waste.
the same thing. The songs that, like, I noticed, I'm like, oh, cool, there's an 80s thing. And then I'm expecting this, like,
Majestic
wide
playlist,
variety.
yeah.
And
It's
it's
not.
not. It's like,
Only
even
one
them.
you get that with is Spotify.
Yeah. Even, like, I could think of 100 different Led Zeppelin songs other than Stairway to Heaven that I would rather hear. And B.A.B., 30 years later,
And
still
they
plays
play
the same
these
song.
stupid social media games.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
who do you prefer?
It's
The A or B, and they've never graduated past A and B. It's the same, like,
it's been, I'm telling
it's
you,
crazy.
in
They're killing rock.
in 1988 it was
But then-
phony phone calls,
Right.
and then playlists for the, like, every company would get to play an hour. Like, you'd pay and your company would get to play, like, pick an hour of songs. But when the company would pick the songs, it was like the same, it like had to fit into their playlist. It was so weird.
There is a good radio station that's out of Stony Brook called 90.7 WFUV, I believe.
Okay.
And, you know, you get a lot of indie music, but also you get some really good stuff, too.
At one point, The Shark came out. When it first came out, it was playing a lot of songs that you wouldn't hear on B.A.B. It was going a lot deeper into the artist, and it was good. But now, like, it's the same type of thing. It's just it's all
The
money.
internet
It's all
and streaming has just
It's
smacked
destroyed.
out
It's
of the
destroyed
park.
it.
I'm glad, though, because honestly,
Well,
life
yeah.
was terrible before Spotify.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
You know,
Because you had Pandora, which was like the early streaming platform, but like you needed like a paid subscription, and the paid subscription was not as good as Spotify's. And so you would get that same like excuse me. Suppose you put like AC/DC,
right?
you'd get another one of those playlists where it would be like "You Shook Me All Night Long."
Sure.
You don't want to hear that. You
No.
want to hear like
It's the last
real
song
stuff.
I want to hear by them.
Uh,
You know what's a big change too? From my generation, what was really big and what made a lot of bands was MTV in those days. Because before my generation, there was no MTV.
right.
Then
But there was a lot of music videos made.
There
which
were.
is interesting.
there were, but I'm saying it wasn't mass consumed. It
Right.
was like you'd see it if a
Like
band.
the Beatles have music videos.
They did, but it was only played
For them and
on
their-
like
yeah.
what those were done for was, let's say the Beatles were booked to play on American Bandstand. They wouldn't go. They would send that video
Right.
in lieu of going to the show.
Smart.
But then you wouldn't see it again.
Right.
Whereas MTV, if like Duran Duran came out with a song that you like,
They blew it up.
the video would be cool, and then every hour you'd see it, and it was a new medium. So, but then they went away from that. Those channels went away from the music videos, and
They also
you know,
had great guys like Kurt Loder.
Yeah, it
and,
was
like,
just
it was like a,
it was just a
This is
cultural
cool.
touchstone. It really
It was.
was. It was a big change, and it was
it really died hard.
It did, but I'll tell you, that's one of the touchstones of my life. When MTV
I don't think
came
I've
out,
watched
it was
MTV
huge. Hmm?
in maybe over 10 years.
Kids, when I was young, that was like you can't. That's another thing that I can't overestimate to you, how important to the life of a kid MTV was in those days. It was huge.
When I was a kid, it was huge.
It
we had
was
Blink 182,
huge.
and
Yeah.
like, I know that was
No,
different time,
I get it. I get
but
it.
do you remember like Spring
Yeah.
Break would be on MTV,
Sure,
and
sure.
like you'd have all those concerts
Yes.
of the pop punks and
Yep.
all that? When I was a kid, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
And Nirvana had just ended,
Yeah.
so you had like a lot of
Yeah, the grunge stuff.
you
tail
had a
end.
lot of like memorial services
Sure.
on MTV that
Yep.
were really cool for like Nirvana and Kurt Cobain and all that.
Well,
Those are some of my youngest memories. I
keep
was, like,
in
obsessed
mind-
with that.
Prince Purple Rain, for instance, just came out.
Right.
And all of a sudden, you're seeing that video. Michael Jackson Thriller just came out. Rolling Stone Start Me Up just
Yeah.
came out on the radio. And now you're seeing that video. Like, there was still so much great music that was around that was, like, accessible now.
You know who
didn't
should
have to
be
go
on that
search
list
it.
is the Buggles.
Video, well, that was the first video
I
on
mean, that's
MTV.
like no
Yeah.
one will, that song is in outer space somewhere. I'm convinced.
That was the first song played on MTV. Video killed the radio, and it did. It basically did, because if
and
you
now
didn't have
you
a good
have
look,
streaming killing the video star.
eventually there is something that always
It's amazing.
replaces that.
It really is.
Look, I remember, as a young kid, record albums were where it was at. Then late 70s, it was 8-track. Then I got my first car. It had an 8-track player, and I had to get a cassette player. So I got an attachment to play cassettes, and then 5 years later, everybody had CDs, and then it was just on and on. And then it was laser discs, and tapes were out, and then laser discs, and then DVDs, and it's like on and on and on. Technology just marches on. I don't know where the finish line is, though. Where is it gonna stop? Where you just can't get any easier, any smaller, as far as like you'd have a laser disc which was like the size of a record album. I remember my friend didn't have a VCR anymore. He had a laser disc player, and we were like, oh, the quality is great. You put it on, but it was like so big, you're holding a record. Then it was DVDs. Now everything is done through the internet. It's just, where is that finish line where the quality can't be any better? It's almost like, you're seeing something, is it the quality better than reality? Like, where is the finish line with this stuff? So
Well,
I
with
just
that,
don't know.
we're gonna wrap that up, and just experimenting with a little bit of exit music.
Oh, nice.
See how it sounds on the podcast. Just have a little fun there. That's that. We'll be back. That was a great point you made there, though, about where does it stop, where does it start, and how far.
Where is that finish line? Like, it used to be the quality of the picture, and each time you went from VCR to Laserdisc to DVD, the picture got better and better. When is it going to be clearer than what you're seeing with your own two eyes? Like, I don't know where that finish line is, but I don't know.
Well, with that, we're gonna leave it
Time
there,
marches on.
and I got a perfect song to march out of. It's the Marching Home. We can probably get our hands on that and not get in trouble. So the way it's working here, people, is you got to have like the artist be dead for 100 years before you can use their song. So
We're trying to find artists that have been dead
we're like
for
we're using Civil War era
Yeah.
songs here, and like from the Dark Ages.
Yep.
Pretty crazy how that works. Anyway, everybody have a great day. Any big plans for you for the day?
Just gonna do my thing. I gotta actually go over some stocks. I wanted to purchase some stocks, so it's
Tesla. Have a great day, everybody.